There is a place in Colorado where the trees simply stop. Not thin out, not shrink, they stop. Along a line you can see from miles away, as though something drew it there on purpose. Above that line, nothing grows taller than your ankle. The wind moves across open ground for hours without meeting a single obstacle, and running through the middle of it, impossibly, is a paved road. Colorado holds more high country than any state in America, more than 50 summits above 14,000 feet, an entire spine of the continent, folded upward and left standing. For most of human history, this was country you crossed on foot, or on the back of an animal, or not at all. And then, over the course of a single century, people built roads into it, not roads that had to exist, not the shortest way from one town to another. These are roads that climb when they could have gone around. Roads that cling to cliff faces because someone decided the view from that ledge was worth the risk of putting it there. Roads that vanish under 25 feet of snow every winter and have to be dug out again each spring by machines the size of houses, for no reason except that people want to drive them. 14 of them, threading through mining towns that boomed and died in a decade, across mesas the size of small countries, through canyons where the rock is older than almost anything you have ever stood on, past peaks so photographed that their reflection has become shorthand for an entire state. This is a journey across the roof of a continent, and it begins at the highest paved road in the United States. Every road has a reason. This one has an argument. Trail Ridge Road runs 48 miles across Rocky Mountain National Park, connecting the town of Estes Park in the east to Grand Lake in the west. At its highest point, it reaches 12,183 feet above sea level, which makes it the highest continuous paved road in the country. 11 of those miles sit entirely above the tree line. But the number is not what makes it remarkable. What makes it remarkable is that anyone thought to build it at all. Before Trail Ridge, crossing this section of the Rockies meant Fall River Road, narrow, unpaved, brutally steep, in places barely wide enough for a single vehicle. As visitors arrived in growing numbers through the 1920s, it became clear that something better was needed. What the National Park Service and the Bureau of Public Roads chose to build instead was not simply a safer road. It was a road designed to be experienced. Construction began around 1929. Crews worked with the specific instruction to keep the landscape intact, cutting the route to follow the natural contour of the ridges rather than blasting through them. The alpine tundra it crosses is a slow world. Plants here can take decades to recover from a single boot print. The engineers knew it. The road was fitted to the mountain rather than forced upon it. The result climbs through a sequence of entire worlds. Montane forest gives way to subalpine spruce. The spruce thins, then stops, and then the road emerges onto open tundra, where the growing season lasts a matter of weeks and the conditions resemble the Arctic more than they resemble Colorado. There are no guardrails on the high sections. The drop-offs are considerable. Near the summit stands the Alpine Visitor Center at 11,796 feet, the highest visitor center anywhere in the national park system. And then, sometime in October, It ends. The snow arrives, and the plows stop fighting it. Drifts build to 25 feet on the western slope. The road disappears completely, and for 7 months this landscape returns to what it was for every year before the road existed at all. Trail Ridge was built so that people could see. It is one of the few roads in America with no other purpose but descend the eastern slope, back down through the spruce, back below that line where the trees begin again, and the country changes its mind about why roads exist. In 1859, a Georgia prospector named John Gregory found gold in a gulch west of Denver. What happened next is difficult to overstate. Within months, thousands of men were living in canyons that had been empty the previous winter. The ground here proved so productive that the district around Central City and Black Hawk earned a nickname that stuck for a century. The richest square mile on Earth, the Peak-to-Peak Highway, runs straight through it. "55 miles, beginning at Estes Park in the north and ending in the old gold country at Black Hawk. It is not one road but 3, stitched together. Colorado Highway 7 carries you south past Long's Peak. Past Allen Spark it becomes Highway 72. At Nederland it becomes Highway 119 for the final descent into the mining towns. It is also, by most accounts, the oldest scenic byway in Colorado, dating to 1918. That date matters. Trail Ridge would not open for another 14 years. This road came first, and it came from a different impulse entirely. Before it was a byway, it was a single-lane dirt track called the Skyline Road, built to connect the mountain settlement of Ward with Estes Park, a working road, laid across working country, and the work is still visible. Drive the southern half and look at the hillsides, the pale scars running down them are mine tailings, waste rock pushed out of the mountain and left where it fell. They have been there for more than 100 years, and the forest has still not taken them back. Off the highway sit the remains of Apex and Nevadaville, towns that existed because there was ore beneath them and emptied when there was not. Then there is what the money built. The Central City Opera House still stands, a National Historic Landmark, raised by people who had come to a wilderness gulch chasing metal and decided within a few short years that they wanted opera. The road climbs and falls between roughly 8,000 feet at Black Hawk and around 9,600 near Ward. To the west, the Continental Divide holds the horizon the entire way, the Indian Peaks. Long's Peak, standing over the northern stretch like a landmark you cannot lose. Two roads. One built so that people could look at mountains, one built because there was something inside them. But gold was only the first fever. Barely 20 years later, a second metal pulled a second wave of men into a valley just south of here, and to reach what they left behind, the road has to climb far higher than this one ever does. The men who came for gold in 1859 found something else. At Georgetown, in the valley of Clear Creek, the gold ran out quickly. What replaced it was silver, and the silver did not run out for decades. The town became known as the Silver Queen. At its height, it held more than 5,000 people, and they built like they intended to stay. More than 200 Victorian buildings went up in a mountain valley barely wide enough to hold them. Most of them are still there. Georgetown today is a National Historic Landmark District, a 19th century town preserved almost intact. And running south out of it, climbing hard, is Guanella Pass. "22 miles from Georgetown to the tiny settlement of Grant, crossing a summit at 11,669 feet. It is not a road that was designed. It began as a wagon trail, the working route between two mining valleys, hauling ore and supplies over the divide because there was no other way through. The name came much later, in 1953, honoring Byron Guanella, a road supervisor and county commissioner who spent close to 50 years keeping these mountains passable. The climb out of Georgetown gains roughly 3,000 feet. It moves through spruce and fir, past cascading creeks, then into broad high meadows where beaver still work the streams. And then, as on Trail Ridge, the trees give out. The summit sits above timberline in open tundra, and what surrounds it is difficult to overstate. Gray's Peak and Torrey's Peak to the west, both above 14,200 feet. Mount Blue Sky to the east, a mountain that carried a different name for more than a century before Colorado changed it. And directly across, Mount Bierstadt at 14,065 feet, one of the most climbed high summits in the state. Below Georgetown, another relic of the silver years still runs, the Georgetown Loop Railway, built to connect Georgetown with Silver Plume, a distance so short and a grade so steep that engineers had to spiral the track over itself to manage it. The Devil's Gate Bridge carries it roughly 100 feet above Clear Creek. Gold, then silver, lead, zinc, copper. For 50 years these mountains were valued entirely by what could be taken out of them. But the Rockies produce something else, quietly, every single spring, something worth vastly more than every ounce of silver ever pulled from Clear Creek. It runs off these peaks in April, and it does not stop. And there is a road built specifically to follow it, from the first trickle to the moment it becomes a river that shapes half a continent. High in Rocky Mountain National Park, below the Never Summer Range, snowmelt gathers into a clear stream running across green meadow. You could step across it. Nothing about it suggests what it becomes. That stream is the Colorado River. Downstream it will carve the Grand Canyon. It will supply water to Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California. It will be dammed, diverted, fought over in court for a century, and it will run roughly 1,450 miles toward the Gulf of California. The Colorado River Headwaters Byway follows the first 80 of them. The route begins near Grand Lake, on the shore of Colorado's largest natural lake, and runs west along Highway 34. It passes Shadow Mountain Reservoir and Lake Granby. It moves through Granby, then Hot Sulphur Springs, then Partial, then Kremling, ranching country, wide valleys, hayfields, cattle, the continental divide standing behind it all. This is the quietest road on this journey, and that is the point. For most of its length, the Colorado here does not look important. It looks like any Rocky Mountain trout stream. Then, the land opens beneath it. South of Kremling, the byway leaves pavement and becomes the Trough Road, gravel, climbing through sagebrush and pinyon juniper country toward Gore Canyon. The river drops into a chasm cut through Precambrian gneiss and schist, rock among the oldest exposed anywhere in the state. The walls rise more than 1,000 feet. Inside that canyon, the river falls at roughly 68 feet per mile for 3 miles. It is widely considered the most difficult commercially rafted whitewater in Colorado, and possibly in the country. At Inspiration Point, the road stops and lets you look down at it. A river that was a meadow stream 40 miles ago, now tearing through solid rock. The byway ends at State Bridge, site of the first bridge the state ever built across the Colorado. Little of the original structure survives. The river does. This is what the mountains actually make. Not silver, water, delivered south and west to places that could not exist without it. But turn back east, climb again toward the spine of the continent, and there is a valley where another river begins. The Arkansas, running the opposite direction, toward the Mississippi and the Atlantic. And standing beside its headwaters is a town that sits higher than any other city in the United States, a place that produced more wealth and lost it faster than almost anywhere in America. In 1860, prospectors found gold in a gulch high in the Tabeguache Range. Within months, around 8,000 men were living there, in tents and cabins, in a settlement they called Oro City. Over the next few years, they pulled out more placer gold than any other site in Colorado. And then, within about 5 years, it was gone. By 1870, fewer than 100 miners remained. The ones who stayed kept finding a heavy black sand that clogged their sluices. It was an irritation. Eventually, someone had it assayed. The sand was cerussite, a lead carbonate ore, and it was extraordinarily rich in silver. What followed was one of the largest mining booms in American history. Roughly 135 mines were sunk between 1877 and the mid-1890s. The town, renamed Leadville by residents who believed lead had the better future, held more than 30,000 people by 1880. The top of the Rockies Byway runs straight through what is left. It is a route that rarely drops below 9,000 feet and crosses the Continental Divide twice. At its center sits Leadville itself, at roughly 10,150 feet, the highest incorporated city in the United States. Around 70 blocks of Victorian architecture remain standing, alongside a mining district covering some 20 square miles. The fortunes made here reached far beyond Colorado. Horace Tabor became one of the wealthiest men in the West and one of the most famous, largely for what he did with the money. The Guggenheim dynasty drew early wealth from this ground. Above the town stand Mount Elbert and Mount Massive, the two highest peaks in Colorado, both above 14,400 feet. Below it, the Arkansas River begins its run east. And then, in 1893, the silver market collapsed and Leadville fell with it. What survived is strange and worth seeing. A Victorian city of opera houses and mansions, sitting 2 miles above the sea, in a valley where winter lasts most of the year, a place that was briefly one of the richest towns on earth, and then simply was not. From Leadville, the byway continues west. It runs past Twin Lakes, where wealthy mining families once kept summer resorts, and where a high toll road once climbed toward the silver camps beyond the divide. That toll road still exists. It is paved now, and it carries a state highway, and it climbs to a place where the road can only survive about half the year. The road over Independence Pass exists because of a rumor. In the winter of 1879, prospectors crossing the divide from the Leadville side found silver in the Roaring Fork Valley. A camp went up almost immediately, high on the eastern slope, and they called it Independence. Within a few years it held a few hundred people. Within about a decade it was empty. What remains of it still stands beside the highway. Cabins, a mill site, timber going gray in the thin air. State Highway 82 crosses the divide here at 12,095 feet. It is the highest paved state highway in Colorado. It is not the highest paved road in the state, and since Cottonwood Pass was paved, it is no longer the highest paved crossing of the Continental Divide, but it remains one of the great high roads in North America, and it feels like it. "32 miles of mountain driving between Twin Lakes and Aspen. The summit sits about 1,000 feet above treeline, on open windswept ground, scattered with shallow pools and snow that lasts most of the summer. There are no services up there, just a parking area, a short paved loop, and 2 overlooks that hand you the Continental Divide in every direction." The western descent is the part people remember. The road drops at a sustained grade across bare rock and scree, narrowing in places to a shelf where 2 vehicles pass carefully and slowly. Trucks and campers longer than 35 feet are prohibited outright. There is simply not enough road, and every autumn it closes. Usually in early November, sometimes sooner if the snow arrives early, the gates go down and Highway 82 ceases to exist as a through route. It reopens around late May. For roughly half of every year, Aspen and Twin Lakes are separated by a wall of mountains, and the detour runs well over 100 miles. That is the trade. The road takes you to 12,000 feet because it has to. There was no gentler way through, and the men who wanted the silver did not care. Below the western descent, the valley softens into aspen groves and the roaring Fork River. The road delivers you into a town that was built by mining and rebuilt, a century later, by something else entirely. And just south of that town, up a narrow side road, stand two peaks so photographed, so relentlessly visited, that the authorities eventually had to stop people driving there at all. There is a photograph almost everyone has seen. Two dark red peaks, nearly symmetrical, standing behind a still lake that holds their reflection. In autumn, the aspens on the lower slopes turn gold, and the image becomes so complete that it looks arranged. These are the Maroon Bells. They are widely described as the most photographed mountains in North America, and the road that reaches them may be the most restricted scenic drive in Colorado. Maroon Creek Road climbs roughly 8 miles from Aspen Highlands to Maroon Lake, beneath Maroon Peak and North Maroon Peak, both above 14,000 feet. Their color is the first clue that something here is different. Most of Colorado's high peaks are gray granite. The bells are mudstone, deep red, layered and crumbling, which is exactly why climbers treat them with such caution. The problem was never the mountains. The problem was how many people wanted to see them. Maroon Creek Road is narrow, and the parking at the lake is limited to a handful of spaces. By the 2010s, the demand had outgrown the road entirely, and the White River National Forest introduced a managed access system. Today, for most of the season, you cannot simply drive here. The road opens around mid-May and closes in early November. Through the core season, private vehicles are barred from the scenic area during the day, and visitors reach the lake by shuttle from Aspen Highlands. Drivers who want their own car at the lake must hold a parking reservation and arrive early in the morning or in the evening, which produces something unexpected. Before 8 in the morning, the road belongs to a small group of people who chose to be awake for it. Photographers arrive in darkness and set up on the shore. Hikers pass through toward Crater Lake and the wilderness beyond, and for a short while, before the first shuttle climbs the valley, the most photographed mountains on the continent are almost quiet. Then the light reaches the peaks, the lake holds them, and it becomes obvious why anyone bothered. This is the summit of the journey in every sense. Highest passes, most famous peaks, the postcard image of an entire state. Everything so far has been some version of the same landscape: granite, snow, aspen, altitude. But Colorado is not only mountains, and the western half of the state looks almost nothing like this. Drive 4 hours toward the Utah border, and the peaks flatten, the colors change, and the highest points on the horizon have no summits at all. Everything so far has been about peaks. This is a mountain with no summit at all. Grand Mesa rises out of western Colorado as a single enormous table. Its top covers roughly 500 square miles, sitting around 10,000 feet, about 6,000 feet above the desert valley at its base. There is no ridge, no cone, no final rock to stand on, just a flat green world suspended above a dry one. It is commonly described as the largest flat-topped mountain on Earth. The reason it exists is written in its rim. Around 10 million years ago, lava filled what was then a valley and cooled into a hard basalt cap. Everything around it was softer, sedimentary, and over the following millions of years the rain and the rivers took all of it away. The basalt did not move. What was once the low ground became the high ground, and the landscape inverted. The Grand Mesa Scenic Byway runs about 63 miles, climbing Highway 65 from Interstate 70 through the canyon of Plateau Creek and dropping south to Cedar Edge. The climb is the strange part. You start in high desert, sagebrush and rock and heat. Within an hour you are in old-growth spruce and fir, aspen groves, meadows of wildflowers, and lakes. So many lakes that visitors stop counting. More than 300 of them, stream-fed, scattered across the top of the mesa like something poured there. In summer, while the valley below runs into triple-digit temperatures, it stays cool up here. The essential detour is Land's End Road, which runs west along the mesa top to Land's End Observatory, part paved, part gravel, open only in the warm months. It ends at the western rim. From the overlook, the ground simply stops and falls roughly 6,000 feet to the Grand Valley. On a clear day, the view reaches south to the peaks of the San Juans, mountains we have not arrived at yet. The Crag Crest Trail runs along the mesa's spine, and from it, on the right day, you can see about 100 miles. This is the same state as Trail Ridge and the Maroon Bells, and it shares almost nothing with them. No summit, no pass, a mountain defined entirely by the fact that its top is flat. Western Colorado is full of things like this, landscapes that make sense only once you understand what the water did to them. And a short drive south of here is the strangest of all of them. A canyon that geologists still cannot fully explain, one that cannot decide which way it drains. Water always chooses one direction. That is what water does. It finds the low ground and it goes, and everything downstream of it belongs to a single system. There is one canyon on Earth where this is not true, and it sits in far western Colorado, about half an hour south of Grand Junction. Unaweep Canyon has a divide in the middle of it. At a point on the canyon floor, so subtle you could drive past without noticing, the ground rises very slightly. East Creek runs out one end and eventually joins the Gunnison River. West Creek runs out the other and joins the Dolores. One canyon, two mouths, water leaving in opposite directions. The Ute knew this long before anyone measured it. Their name for the place, Unaweep, is usually translated as canyon with two mouths, or the parting of the waters. How it formed is still argued over. There is no settled explanation for a canyon that drains both ways, and geologists have been proposing answers for well over a century. The Unaweep and Tabeguache Byway follows Highway 141 southwest from Whitewater, then Highway 145 south to Placerville, roughly 133 miles. The second half of the name comes from the Tabeguache Band of the Ute, whose name has been translated as people living on the warm side of the mountain. The road leaves the Gunnison River and enters the canyon through a chaos of tumbled boulders, climbs 9 Mile Hill, and opens into a narrow valley walled by sheer cliffs. Those walls are old. The granite exposed in Unaweep dates back roughly 1.5 billion years, comparable in age to the deepest rock in the Grand Canyon. Above it sit far younger red sandstones, and the boundary between them represents a gap in the record of well over 1 billion years. Beyond the canyon, the byway follows the Dolores River through Red Rock Country, past the ruins of Driggs Mansion and the remains of the Hanging Flume, a wooden water channel bolted to a sheer cliff face by men chasing gold. There are long stretches with no fuel and no phone signal. That is part of what it is. This is a road about time, rock older than almost anything you will ever stand on, but 1.5 billion years is abstract. It is a number, not an image. Further west, in the last corner of the state, the rock holds something much easier to picture, something that walked. The rock here remembers. In the high desert of far western Colorado, the layers hold one of the richest concentrations of dinosaur fossils anywhere in the world. Not fragments, complete skeletons, trackways, entire quarries of bone still emerging from the sandstone. The Dinosaur Diamond is the route built around them. It takes its name from its shape, a rough diamond looping through western Colorado and eastern Utah. At the northern point sits Dinosaur National Monument, where a quarry wall of exposed bone is preserved in place, still embedded, exactly where it was buried. From the visitor center, the Harper's Corner Road runs about 31 miles into canyon country above the Green and Yampa rivers. At the southern end is Colorado National Monument, and the reason to go there is Rim Rock Drive, 22 miles carved along the edge of a red sandstone canyon system, a road built largely in the 1930s, running the rim with the drop immediately beside you. In geological terms, it is a cross-section. The gneiss and schist at the bottom of those canyons is around 1.7 billion years old. The sandstone at the top is far younger. Between the two ends is Fruita, with the Dinosaur Journey Museum and the Rabbit Valley Trail through time, where fossils remain visible in the ground. And there is older human history layered over the older rock. Canyon Pintado, south of Rangeley, holds around 50 recorded archaeological sites, with petroglyphs and pictographs left on the sandstone by people who lived in this country for thousands of years. One honest note: roughly half the Dinosaur Diamond lies in Utah. The Colorado portion stands entirely on its own, but the full loop crosses a state line, which is unusual for a route on this journey. This is the far edge of Colorado, where the mountains have given out entirely and the state becomes desert. Now turn around, go back east, past the peaks, past the high passes, all the way to the opposite corner, because in the far south, against the New Mexico border, there is a range that looks like nothing else in the Rockies. They are visible from 100 miles away, and they do not belong. The Spanish Peaks rise alone out of the southern Colorado plains, detached from the ranges behind them. They were landmarks for anyone crossing this country, and they were held sacred by indigenous peoples long before anyone drew a road here. What makes them geologically remarkable is what surrounds them. Radiating outward from the peaks are volcanic dikes, molten rock forced up through cracks in the surrounding stone, cooled hard, and then left standing when the softer ground eroded away. The result is a series of stone walls running across open country for miles, straight and vertical, looking unmistakably built. One formation, spanning a hillside between Couchura and Lavetta, is known as the Devil's Stairsteps. The Highway of Legends runs 82 miles through all of it, along Highway 12 between Trinidad and Walsenburg. The byway climbs to Guanella Pass, and a branch continues over Cordova Pass at roughly 11,250 feet. On that stretch, the road passes through the Apishapa Arch, a tunnel cut directly through one of the volcanic dikes. Elsewhere, it runs through Stonewall Gap, where a wall of upturned sandstone stands across the valley, with a gap just wide enough for the road and the river. The river is the Purgatoire. The name descends from a Spanish phrase meaning the river of lost souls. And while the rest of Colorado was chasing gold and silver, this corner mined coal. At Cokedale, now a National Historic District, a long row of brick coke ovens still lines the road. Arched, repeating, half buried in the hillside, they look far more Roman than Western. They were used to bake coal into coke for the smelters. The coal also produced the darkest chapter in the state's history. In 1914, at Ludlow, a tent colony of striking miners and their families was attacked by the Colorado National Guard and company guards. Around 20 people died. Among them were women and children. The site is preserved today by the United Mine Workers of America, and what happened there changed American labor law. Legends, coal, volcanic walls, and a river named for the lost. This is the most human road on this journey. Now go west again, into the San Juans, into a corner of Colorado, so remote that the towns along the next road have populations you could count in the hundreds, and where one of them produced the strangest and most disputed story in the entire state. Some country punishes people for being there at the wrong time of year. The silver thread runs 117 miles along Highway 149, from South Fork in the south, through Creed, over 2 high passes, down to Lake City, and on to Blue Mesa Reservoir, 3 small towns across roughly 100 miles of the San Juan Mountains. It is the emptiest road on this journey. For much of its length, it follows the upper Rio Grande before the river turns south toward the desert and the border. Creed came late and came fast. The silver strike arrived around 1890, and at its peak the town was reportedly gaining as many as 300 people a day. 3 years later, the silver market collapsed, and Creed went with it. Fires and floods took much of what remained. It sits today in a narrow canyon under enormous cliffs, a town of a few hundred where thousands once lived. North of Creed, the road climbs past North Clear Creek Falls, over Spring Creek Pass, and then onto Slumgullion Pass. Slumgullion is a place where the mountain itself is moving. An enormous earth flow has been sliding down the slope here for centuries, and part of it is still active. Long ago, it slid far enough to dam the Lake Fork of the Gunnison River, which created Lake San Cristobal, the second largest natural lake in Colorado. From Windy Point, the road hands you Gray Peak and Wetterhorn Peak, and then drops in switchbacks toward Lake City. And near the bottom of that descent is the story this region has never escaped. In the winter of 1873, a man named Alfred Packer led 5 prospectors into these mountains against clear advice. They were caught by snow with almost no food. Around 2 months later, Packer walked out alone, and he was noticeably well fed. The remains of his companions were later found near the Lake Fork. What actually happened is still argued about. Packer gave more than one account. In one, he killed a single man in self-defense and survived on the bodies of the others. Other versions, and the prosecution, held that he killed all 5. He was convicted, and the case has never fully settled in the public mind. That is the character of this country, beautiful in July and entirely indifferent in January. South and west of here, the San Juans rise higher still, and a single road loops through all of them, 236 miles of it, rated among the finest drives in the United States. And hidden inside that loop is 125-mile stretch that people still talk about with something close to fear. If Colorado had to be reduced to one road, it would probably be this one. The San Juan Skyway is a loop of roughly 236 miles through the southwestern corner of the state. In 1996, it received the highest designation the United States gives a road, All-American Road, meaning it holds features found nowhere else and is considered a destination in itself. It begins, conventionally, at Durango. North of town, Highway 550 climbs over Coal Bank Pass and then Molas Pass, both above 10,600 feet, into Silverton. Silverton sits in a high valley at the head of the Animas River, a National Historic Landmark district, still connected to Durango by the narrow-gauge railway built to haul ore out of these mountains. Beyond Silverton lies the stretch this chapter is deliberately leaving alone. We will come back to it. Continue the loop north to Ouray and Ridgeway, then west and south toward Telluride. Telluride occupies a box canyon so tight that the town simply stops where the walls close in. It was a mining camp before it was a ski resort, and the transformation from one to the other took less than a century. Just outside town is something easy to miss and genuinely important. At Ames, a small hydroelectric plant became one of the first in the world to generate and transmit commercial alternating current. In the early 1890s, the technology that electrified the world was tested in a Colorado mining valley. South of Telluride, the road climbs Lizard Head Pass, named for a spire of rock that stands over it. From the pass you can see Mount Wilson, Wilson Peak and El Diente, three summits above 14,000 feet, arranged like a wall. Then the road descends through Rico and follows the Dolores River down into gentler country, past Dolores and into Cortez. And here the journey collides with something far older than mining. Mesa Verde National Park sits just east of Cortez, holding cliff dwellings built by ancestral Puebloan people centuries before any European arrived. From there, Highway 160 runs east through the La Plata Mountains and closes the loop at Durango. Alpine passes, box canyons, Victorian mining towns, and 1,000-year-old architecture built into cliff faces. One road. But we skipped a section. 25 miles between Silverton and Ouray, the most photographed, most feared, most argued over piece of pavement in Colorado. It was not built for the view. It was built because there was ore on the other side, and a man decided he could get a road up a cliff that everyone else had given up on. In 1880, a company began building a road north out of Ouray toward the Red Mountain mines. They ran out of money before they finished. The terrain above Ouray is not a slope, it is a wall of rock above a gorge, and the engineering required to get a wagon road up it was beyond what they could afford. By 1882, the project was stalled on cliffs described at the time as impassable. Then, Otto Mears bought into it. Mears was a Russian-born immigrant and Civil War veteran who had become the most capable road builder in the San Juans, known as the Pathfinder. He brought in experienced crews and a great deal of dynamite, blasted the route directly into the rock face, and reportedly spent around $40,000 per mile on the worst sections. The road reached Ironton, then continued over the pass and down to Silverton, completed in the mid-1880s. He ran it as a toll road. A team and wagon paid $5. A single saddle animal paid $1. The tolls were resented enough that the county took the road over in 1887. It was rebuilt and improved as a modern highway in the 1920s. Today it is 25 miles of US Highway 550 between Ouray and Silverton, and it is the most notorious drive in the state. Ouray sits at around 7,700 feet, in a box canyon so enclosed it is called the Little Switzerland of America. From there the road climbs into the Uncompahgre Gorge, on a shelf cut into the cliff, narrow lanes, hairpin bends, and almost no guardrail. That last part is deliberate, and the reason is worth knowing. This is one of the most avalanche-prone roads in North America, crossed by well over 100 avalanche paths, receiving something in the order of 25 feet of snow in a season. Plows have to clear a narrow 2-lane shelf, and the only place to put the snow is over the edge. A guardrail would make the road impossible to keep open. So there is no barrier, just the lane, and then the gorge. The summit is Red Mountain Pass, above 11,000 feet, beneath slopes stained deep red by oxidized iron in the rock. Around it stand the skeletons of the mining district that justified all of this: headframes, tailings, collapsing timber. Nobody agrees on where the name came from. Some say the views, some say the construction cost, some say the fill contains valuable ore, and the oldest version, the one locals still repeat, is that you would have to pay them $1 million to drive it in winter. "14 roads. Some were built for ore, some for silver, or coal, or gold that had already run out by the time the road was finished. Some were built simply so that people could see, which in 1920s America was a genuinely strange thing to spend money on. They cross a landscape that did not want them, tundra that takes decades to heal from a footprint, cliffs that had to be blasted apart a few feet at a time, slopes that still slide, canyons that still flood, snow that still buries entire highways for half the year. And every spring, people go back up and dig them out again. The towns that paid for these roads are mostly gone, or nearly. Independence is timber going gray in the wind. Creed holds a few hundred where thousands lived. What outlasted all of it was the roads. They were built for a purpose that expired, and then they were kept for a different one. The ore is finished, the route remains, and people drive it now for exactly the reason the miners never would have understood, because of what it looks like from up there. Somewhere above 11,000 feet, the trees stop again. The wind moves across open ground without meeting anything, and a thin line of pavement runs across the top of a continent, going nowhere in particular, for no reason at all except that someone once decided the view was worth it. In October, the snow comes, and the gates close, and the roads disappear. They will be there again in the spring.